Did you know that there is something called the study of the law of language, philology? Oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying this properly. Hey everyone, welcome back to an episode of Drop Your Noise. If you're new, my name is Kirti and welcome. So, this week's guest, Benedicte, is somebody I've been waiting and wanting to share and thought she's the perfect guest to start our New Year's off. She speaks about these four principles that she follows on how she works with in her planning, in her strategies, and she also shares this with her other communities. Now, I got very excited when I first met her because we're both passionate about women in leadership. But I also love these four principles she follows because it aligns well about this idea of the importance of lateral thinking, importance of critical thinking. And also this thing about stepping out of not our comfort zone, but our comfort thinking. Now, hear me out. I've been using AI last month quite a bit for business planning, for my content strategy. But every time I walked away and I thought I had it together, I'd come back and go, ooh, this doesn't look okay. Why was I convinced by it? Because while I'd walked away, my mind was downloading with the speed of other thoughts that were outside of my comfort thinking. And AI felt more like a comfort thinker for me. And I was wondering, well, what prompts am I using wrong, or should I use different prompts? So by sitting down with Benedicte, it gave me a fresh perspective of maybe I should tweak my prompts, or how could I change the conversations? But also, more than that, isn't it time to trust myself a little bit more? But anyway, that's me. I would love for you to listen and find out what are your thoughts around this week's conversation about stepping out of your comfort thinking. Enjoy. The sentence that you said was the unconventional is your asset. And I've not heard this before. So how did you come to it?
Well, I guess that I have to thank my mom for that, most probably. I know it's a little bit cliche, but I always like to say that if I speak about my career, it's a bit like I've got a master in philology and I ended up in the technology sector for almost 30 years, right? Yeah. So big imposter syndrome, that feeling of not belonging there, not, being at ease because all the people that I was encountering were, IT engineers, telecom engineers, you name it, all type of engineers, and I wasn't one, right? And I remember that I was struggling with this, and one day my mom said, "But actually, they should be happy because you come up with a different perspective," and I was quite shocked by this statement because my mom didn't go to university. My mom had no clue whatsoever of what I was doing for a living, and she just came in there with the value you bring is the fact that you're not like them. And in a way, she was right, because what I was bringing to the table was kind of a more lateral thinking as opposed to very siloed viewed and scientific view of what was happening in the organization. So yeah, that's what. Go ahead.
To how am I not
philology? That's it.
Philology. I like my tongue is rolling onto this philology. I've heard of philosophy.
Yeah.
And now this is a completely new word for me. What is that?
Yeah, philology is actually the studies of the language, of linguistics. So I'm a linguist by background. Okay, you may know that I'm fluent in multiple languages. You may actually not know that a few years ago in Dubai, I did launch a language exchange platform. That was a very long time ago, before the kids, before when you have a lot of time. So yes, it's the study of language, but it has also actually a lot of masters in history, in philosophy, and so forth. And I think that's interesting, especially as we speak today in a day and time where our whole humanity is being redefined, right? With artificial
Absolutely.
intelligence. I spent 25 years or more in technology companies, and then suddenly I realized that actually my background is possibly something that in the future might be more needed as we
Yeah.
navigate through what makes us human and what is a machine.
I find it so interesting because, okay, so it's the study of languages. It's not the same as a linguist in some ways, isn't it? There's a difference between a linguist and a philology.
Well,
Am I
it's
saying that
the
right?
philology is actually the. I mean, if you take it from Greek, it's the love of logos, which is language. Okay, that's it, like
Ah,
philosophy is the love of wisdom. Philology is
mhm.
the love of languages. So this is where originally it's coming from. But I mean, those are studies that have, of course, a very strong humanitarian humanity background, I would say, in the back.
I find
So
it very, I'm very finding it very curious, not to get ahead of myself here, but how the space that we're in is generative AI is all about language.
it is. And what we're trying to do is also to mimic, what the way that we think. But there is a big difference though, because putting a name tag on something, because at the end of the day, when you build a model, not that, again, I told you before, I'm not an IT engineer, I'm not an AI engineer. I won't ever say that I am. I did, as you know from my background, a few additional certification in that field, but I'm not an engineer in that field. So the way that those languages work, you put a name tag, and based on that, you create the circuit that enables the computer to understand and recognize what is what. But by naming it, it does not mean that you know and understand in the human way of understanding it.
But that's all the more reason why I think what you've studied is very profound in this day and age, because it's like collective data, but you're just saying, well, actually, linguist is more than this.
Yeah, it's I think it's we come at an interesting crossroad, right? Crossroad right now, right, with this paradigm. So being a linguist lets you to understand not only, okay, I can speak X languages and I will be able to answer to you in Italian or in Dutch or whatever the language that you choose, and that we know together, but it will also shape the way that I see the world, right? Because this is what a language does, right? If just imagine a language where the word red does not exist, you have to
Okay.
describe red using a different approach, right?
Goes
And
back
this
in a way, it goes back to your lateral thinking as well.
Yes, yeah. In a way, you have to be able to look around those areas. So, I mean, back to what we were saying at the start of the conversation. So here I am. I'm coming with a background in humanities and linguistics and philosophy and history, you name it. And I spent more than 15 years in the telecom industry, right, where I had telecom and ICT engineers as colleagues, and each time I had this kind of that imposter syndrome, because I didn't feel that I was fitting in there. And so, what do you do when you have that imposter syndrome? You go back to study, you do your MBA, you do certification on AI and robotics so that you feel that you cannot belong, even if you never really belong. And I kept on doing this for years. And then one day it really hit at me when, as I said, my mom said, but actually the value you bring is the fact that you don't think like others. And this was really kind of a pivotal moment in my career. But it took me almost 20 years to get there.
So Here's two things. Imposter syndrome. I have a love-hate with the word imposter syndrome. A part of me says it kind of defines us, that says that we shouldn't ever have doubts. But I feel that without the doubts, we wouldn't get to where we are.
Correct.
If we were questioning it. And then there is, what does it do once you have the realization that there was no need for this impostering of it, trying to change yourself into it? Okay. How does your confidence then just flourish out of that pivotal moment? So can you describe for me the two?
Yeah, I think that, the imposter syndrome, it has been used and overused. But as you rightly say, if we don't have that kind of self-reflection and self-doubt, we wouldn't grow, we wouldn't force ourselves, we wouldn't put ourselves at risk to kind of counterbalance that imposter syndrome. If I didn't have, for instance, during my career, if I didn't had that sense of not knowing enough, not being at my place, I wouldn't have seen to get more learnings and more experience to increase my self-confidence, right? So from that perspective, I think that it really drives you to go to stretch yourself, to get yourself. It's very uncomfortable when you are in that stretching phase. It's very uncomfortable because you don't know how to do it. And only later on that you look back and say, oh, actually, I feel better now. I feel more confident than what I was a year ago, 5 years ago, whatever the timeline that you name. What happened when I had that kind of aha moment of actually, this is the value that you bring, is that suddenly, I was a bit more at peace with myself to start with.
And is that like a feeling or a liberation? Is it there a certain knowingness or what?
There is a bit of that. And very often I refer to that. You may probably know that it's a very famous cartoon where you see, a monkey, an elephant and a fish, and they're all in front of, someone who's saying, okay, we are going to test your ability of climbing that tree. I mean, obviously not everybody is, has the same skills, but in the jungle or in the nature, they all have, their roles and skill, right? So I think that this gives me that kind of, reassurance, I guess, that I bring value because I think differently, I think laterally, I've got that helicopter view that, others might not have otherwise. So that's the first thing. The second thing that it gave me as well was sharing that also with others, right? With other, my younger self or colleagues that I've met who wouldn't dare sharing that they had those moment of self-doubt as well, right? And this is where, when magic happened, and suddenly you say, well, you're not alone, but if you don't speak about it, you'll never know, right? So
devil's advocate on this one.
Yeah, sure.
One of the thoughts that crossed my mind now is, the moment you have that certain sense of liberation, or you say, okay, well, I own the side of me. I own that I have lateral, I bring that fresh perspective. But then you go into the boardroom and the meetings, and because you have a fresh perspective, because you come in with something different, how open is the room to receive it at that point?
That's actually a very good question, Kirti. And the funny thing is that you need also to understand when what is your strong point becomes your weakness, right?
That was your third aha, right?
That was also one of the aha moment. Absolutely. Because I think that at the start of my career, the fact that I was able to think and put connection between different departments and identify an issue not only at symptom level, but really going into the root by making those different connections, that helped me accelerated my career. But at one point comes a moment in your career where what you have to do is actually exactly the opposite, the other way around. You've got a complex issue, and what you need to do is start simplifying and bring your audience with you. Right?
Give me an example. Or at least give the audience an example.
So I remember that one day I was in the UK, I was in the London office, and my president called me in and said, "You know what? Can I give you a piece of advice?" I say, "Yeah, of course, you can give me a piece of advice." Well, first of all, because it's my boss, so I wouldn't say no. but but second, because feedback is gift, as we always say, and so I say, like, you're able to think relatively fast, but you need also to think that your colleagues may not start from the same starting point as yours, and hence you need to bring them with you. Okay, you need to bring them with you, and you've got two ways of doing this. And that was actually quite a one of those golden nugget moments where I say you can either tell them a story and bring them with you,
Yeah.
or you can just say, you state what you want to say, and then you're going to put your argument underneath that. And that was a very simple suggestion that he made, and it really helped me in my communication with my other colleagues.
You bring something very interesting to the table, because I often hear, okay, well, I don't know if it still exists, but you have different levels of the hierarchical system, right? And then you'd hear from different hierarchy goes, okay, well, as she goes to the top, we can't relate to her. The person is not approachable. So there's that. It's almost like, and it's often between woman to woman, right? That the higher the woman goes, then apparently she does not lift somebody up along the way. And you come to something very interesting, because you're saying as you start going higher up, your strategic thinking also develops, because you're going to a different one. So your strength is actually getting molded, broken, reshaped accordingly, right? So when he says break it down, do we forget that sometimes that language, again, your philology, does that make a difference in the way you then communicate, or the structuring or the languaging you use? Because then you're empowering somebody else.
It does. I mean, just to make an example, sometimes when you come with either complex jargon or elaborated vocabulary, well, you may lose your audience for different reasons, right? I mean, first, simply because not everybody might be a native English-speaking person. I'm not a native English person to start with. Second, you may also create that kind of distance, okay, between people. That's no surprise that some politicians are able to rally many, many people because they use very simple words that are repeated and repeated and repeated, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I think that, getting that understanding, identifying those signals that you're losing, your audience, because they can't relate, because they don't see the exact example you're talking about, is where you need to you help being more approachable, as you were saying.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I find the more somebody said to me, explain your complexity like you would to a 10-year-old, or like to your grandmother.
Yeah.
How would you explain that and take that approach? And listening when you were speaking, sharing about your experience about breaking it down, in some level, I also understand that I've had exactly what you had. And when you're saying it about your boss telling you, it was actually a client telling me that. They were like, you think 10 steps ahead, and I feel like I have to catch up. I'm not there where you are. And I'm so excited that I'm there. And I literally had to bring in the reins. And I found that quite challenging. I don't know how you found it throughout that process.
It's, sometimes it's more difficult to simplify than to complexify it, right? The saying that a good design is when there is nothing left to take out, because
Take out.
it's it's beautiful by its simplicity. And it's the same in when you try to explain a concept to someone. Okay, you make it so simple that they can relate to what they know and what they've lived themselves.
When it comes down to then feedback, right? I'm going to touch upon it, and we've spoken about this. Whenever you and I have met, we've always come back to this: women competing with women, right? And even when we simplify language or we break things down, we're always coming in with this feeling of defensiveness. I find. I don't know if you agree with me or not. So when we simplify language, even sometimes people feel like not respected enough because a woman's feeling I'm not good enough or smart enough, and you're there coming into it. But there's that sense of constantly, I don't know if it's imposter or it is that sense of not feeling trusting to oneself. Is there a difference to that?
This makes me think about a story. A few months ago, I had dinner with a very old friend of mine. I mean, old in the sense that I've known her since the uni time. And I remember talking about the concept of having a number of women on boards, or the gender parity, right, and the quota of having. And I remember telling her, I really don't like this idea of quota, because it feels like it increases the imposter syndrome for women, because then they start asking themselves, am I here because of my capabilities, or am I here because I deserve this role? And I remember that her reaction, instead of, I was expecting her to, you just say, yeah, you're right there. She actually went totally the opposite way. And she said, you see that this reaction is exactly why they are more, and they are women that are trying to keep their turf and just want to be the chosen one and remain as just the chosen one. And I was like really, really shocked. I felt, almost attacked.
Yeah.
And a few days later, I started thinking about what she was saying. And yeah, in a way, sometimes, and especially possibly, the previous generation, maybe it's going to be different for the generations of my daughters, but it was so hard to get there that there is that sense of, now you should sweat and suffer as much as I did, right? Well, actually, by doing this, she's right. We are continuing the agenda of having only few women at the table, instead of growing the pie and enabling more gender diversity in offices. I mean, I've been lucky enough during my career to have supportive mentors. I would say both men and women, possibly more men than women, actually, strangely enough. And all those men had in common the fact that they had seen first time this playing out for their, wife or any relative.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, more men support the women. I have had that too. If I look back at my mentors, I have had women and men. And I find it very interesting as we go further and further, there is that sense of like, I own this and this is my turf. And recently I had gone for a conversation or with other women, and it was indeed that you could see that it's like, I've earned really hard for it. But at the same time, they would say, well, we need to support each other much more. But her body language was the opposite of what she was saying. And so it leads me to ask, well, what are we not aware of in ourselves? Because she didn't mean it. She wasn't aware that her body language and what she was saying did not match.
It's like, lip service of what is politically correct compared to what we feel deep down in the stomach. Because I had a similar experience as well. I was at an event a few weeks back, and I was actually at a similar type of event 2 days apart. On the first one, someone, talked about the elephant in the room and the fact that there was really a lack of sisterhood. And then that's in, a similar event 2 days later, I raised a question, and I was like, and there was skepticism in the room as if it ever existed, So clearly there is something there.
Well, what is our definition of sisterhood?
I think that the definition of sisterhood is to look at, if someone has been able to make it, is to make it also easier and accessible to younger generation, as long as, and I think that this is super important, we have strong and capable women. Okay? Because the last thing we want is the perverse effect of having dilution of quality simply because we're ticking the box in the KPI.
You said the word strong and capable women, right? When I've seen, when I go for these women events, sometimes I walk out rolling my eyes. And at first I thought, why am I doing that? That's really not nice. I really had a lot of judgment to myself, But then I realized there was something happening, which is in the sisterhood definition was we all need to agree. And I couldn't find that I agreed necessarily with the person's point of perspective, but I'm willing to have a hard conversation about it. I'm willing to discuss it. So it's not about being right or wrong, because I think as you go back to that one point you said, another perspective is always a fresh perspective. Mm-hmm. So I walked away, and you hit this thing where we say strong, capable women. Well, what do we define strong, capable women? Because sisterhoods in strong, capable women, wouldn't that mean women having an opinion, having a thought, having a different perspective?
But I think that this is exactly the value that it brings, right? Because unfortunately, many events across conference organization sometimes have that kind of yes, let's feel the consensus, but it doesn't bring any value, right? I think that the value that you bring is as you said, when someone disagree. I mean, of course, always politely and in a way that is argumentative, that has arguments. This is where you bring, a new point of view and a new way of looking at the same reality.
Do you find yourself ever going for these panel discussions or these sisterhood events and feeling a little bit like that you're in this constant repetitive same conversation over and over again?
Yeah, also because sometimes you also have, what is the level of auto-censorship that we've got, right?
Okay.
I don't want to, I don't want to sound like this. I don't want to sound too harsh. I don't want to sound too soft. I don't want to. So you've got back to, your book on
that
your
inner
voice and, how loud are you inside you, right?
Forget my book. It's this point you made. People don't see you the way you see yourself.
That's very true. That's true for everyone, right? In the sense of you're probably familiar with that, that windows of the way that you see yourself, the way that people you see you are the same, the way that you see yourself is different, that the way that people sees you, and then that kind of black box. I remember that few years ago, I had approached one of my boss's peers as a mentor. Okay, mm-hmm. and I remember that one of the first things that he told me when we had the first call is that Benedicte, you appear so well organized and thorough and everything, and I I almost fell off my chair because I said, well, if there is something I don't feel is, of being thorough and organized. So that's what I mean with the way that you see yourself and the inner dialogue that you have is not always the way that people perceive you, right?
Yeah. So if we tie it back into how women are in these sisterhoods, what would beer be?
Sorry, repeat. What would be?
So what would it be like if I tie it back to our conversation of sisterhood? People don't see you the way you see yourself, but yet when we go into that conversation, we're doing the opposite. And the I'm not good enough, I'm this, I'm that. And then we stay in those same cycle of same conversations and the same panel discussions.
Exactly, because what the internal discussion that you have with me, myself, and I are kind of are not empowering you to be your true self. So you need first to master that internal discussion, and the way that you do that is by getting feedback from outside that suddenly look at you from a different standpoint, right? From a different perspective that you hadn't imagined. And if you receive a number of those proof points, well, at one point something it must be true, right? Mm-hmm. If people see you in a way that you don't see yourself, what appears becomes reality.
Very true. And how did you feel? So there are two types of feedback. There's also the positive, the celebration one, like, you're organized and you're structured, that you almost fell off the chair because it was receiving it. And there's receiving it in the celebration style, and there's the one that's receiving it as if it comes across as a personal attack, where it's not feeling very, it's not in the positive, it's in the negative. How did you go through those two? Okay,
that one is more difficult to get, by the way, right? Because
okay,
you may receive it from your from your parents, from your partner, from your kids. Okay, yeah. So recently I got my 14 years old to tell me, "Mom, you really have to manage your anger issues." Thank you. And I said, why does she say that? Why does she say that? And then you start looking at the number of proof points and say, oh, maybe. Yeah, I didn't realize that I was doing this, and she's perfectly right. So that's those are those moments where you can get like kind of honest and harsh feedback, right? Mm-hmm. And in the work environment, it's not always that easy to get that, because sometimes it's it's sugar coated, or it is the harsh feedback is put into the sandwich mechanism, good news, bad news, good news,
yes.
And it kind of become sugar coated, right? I think that one of the exercise that I'm trying to do for my birthday, each time that I'm having a birthday celebration, invite a few friends, we go out for for dinner or drinks, and I say, you know what, I don't really need a gift, but there is one thing that I need, is that, okay, here's a hat, here's a small piece of paper, can you please each put 3 qualities that you see in me, you fold it, you put it in the hat, and then the same for the areas to work on, right?
Ah, I like that.
And this is free therapy. This is free feedback. And I encourage everyone to do it, because this is where you realize that, and by the way, when I did that, mm-hmm. I received also a number of labels that were saying, structured, organized, etc., etc. I said, I can't believe I'm receiving that. And then I was looking at, what am I doing here? I was actually putting all of this in an Excel spreadsheet and looking at occurrence. So they were totally right.
I think I would agree with them, because when our emails were going back and forth, I was like, wow, she is organized. Because you had all the bullet points, you had it thought through, you had everything to the T. And if you see mine, I'm like creative all over the place. And I was like, oh, the structure is good. So yeah. I would say that. And what do you do with then when you receive, Are your friends giving you the constructive feedback as well, or are they saying, "Oh, I don't have anything," or they avoid it, or do they really tell you like it is?
Well, in that case, it was anonymous. Well, anonymous. We were, 20 ladies around the table. So, I mean, I may have an idea of who said what, but not necessarily. And I think it's better, right? Because you want this to be totally unbiased, right? You want this to be anonymous to get real feedback, I think.
I think women are quite open to the feedback because we work really hard on ourselves. I find. I see it often that the feedback they always remember is the harshest one. It's not the moment they get the one that is feels nice or the one that actually is an accomplishment feedback, let's call it. They will dismiss it much easier. Like you said, fall off the chair, and it's very strange to receive it from the work environment, I've noticed. And so they always will look for the harsh ones or the constructive ones.
I don't know if it's female, male, or if it's human in general. But you know what we say about customer experience, right? If someone had a good customer experience, he will tell two or three customers. If he had a bad experience, he will tell to 11 customers or potential customers. At least those were the stats from many years ago. Now with with social media, that might be even more amplified, right? But the point that I wanted to make here is that there is a tendency unfortunately, of paying more attention to negative feedback than to positive feedback, right? Because a little bit like, okay, yeah, oh, well, I'm organized, great. By the way, I still don't believe I am, but I think I'm forcing myself. But that's another discussion. So, okay, I've got drive, I've got energy, but this is kind of a given. So I don't have to look into that. I only want to look at the areas that I need to do, what I need to do to improve, right? Whilst if you think about it, your weakest point and your strongest point are usually all of the same, right? Just in an extreme, just but in extreme. So, for instance, just to give you an example, if someone is telling me, well, you've got a lot of drive, right? It's great, you've got a lot of drive, but the negative of that is, being a bulldozer and not thinking about, not looking at what people want and not getting enough traction from them. So it's the same strength and weaknesses, just taken from a different angle.
I hadn't thought about that actually. It's a very valid point. Because also, in some occasion, your strength is your weakness.
Absolutely, it is.
And you go in with the bag of "this is my strength," only to realize you don't know it all at all. And then again, all your 4 points come in. You have different perspectives on the table. People see you in a different way. And, you're trying to connect dots, and all of a sudden you're here, and that strength, you might have to look at it and go, well, hold on, this is not applied at the right time.
Yeah, you remember that aha moment of at one point you need to unlearn your strengths and do the contrary. But that's exactly the same thing. So, for instance, the fact that I was able to look at the big picture, put the connectors, have multiple departments working together, which was my strength, was also my limitation, and I had to take that out and roll it back and simplify it, because then people were getting overwhelmed. So your strengths and your weaknesses are the same. It's one single coin, but still too much in one area or the other. Those are your attributes that can go positive or negative depending on the circumstances, or the circumstances in your life, but also where you are in your career. Some things help you at the start, and then you need to change them as you move towards in your career.
I think that's such a fabulous reminder. I mean, I'm thinking about this and I go, that's really something to carry, because it keeps you aware that when you walk into every moment in a, whether it's a meeting or a network or even a relationship conversation, if you bring in too much of strength, that's when it doesn't help you. And if you're too apprehensive of it, also, it might hold you back, which
Absolutely.
is the discomfort on is knowing the discomfort.
I used to work with someone a few years ago, and his say was, your strengths and weaknesses are the same coin, except that when you use it, when you are at the balcony, when you use it as a strength, and you are really at the basement, at the cellar, when you use that same thing but as a weakness. So it's the same, but it becomes your weakness.
But either way, when you're down in the basement, I have this analogy that when you're down in the basement, you have to understand how to use your weakness, how to turn your strength into. It's like lateral thinking. I'm trying to find the right word for it, but you try and break your strength and mold it differently, or flex it, or adapt it differently to climb out of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just like you. For instance, let's take another example. Okay, I'm all about having knowledge and insight, and I'm curious, and I this is my strength. It's my weakness at the same time, because at one point I need to say, well, enough is enough, and I need to simplify, because no one will be able to manage all that insight and content, and I will have to spoon feed them in small pieces. Okay, so that strength of thirst for knowledge and insight at one point becomes your weakness, because if you do too much of that, you will appear as messy and overwhelming, right? So when my mentor was telling me, oh, you appear very structured and organized, I was it makes me laugh, because I knew that this was actually a counter reaction of my tendency of accumulating too much. You see?
Yeah.
So it's kind of auto-discipline that you have to put for yourself. And sometimes that auto-discipline appears outside, which is when you say, well, I managed to reach something. I managed to, get to what I didn't know was possible.
It reminds me of in the Buddhist philosophy, there's something called not too tight, not too loose.
Yeah.
And this is
Balance.
exactly it. It's just
Balance.
not, yeah, not know when you shouldn't be too tight, and know when you shouldn't be too loose. And then I come back to this image of this girl I had seen, and she was very protective. And I also noticed it was a very cultural thing. Like, this is a big accomplishment she did, even in terms of her strides as a woman from her culture, from Asian descent. But at the same time, if you would approach her with not too tight, not too loose, you couldn't approach her like how in Europe, there's always that sense of like, let's keep it grounded, There is a not too tight, not too loose sometimes in there. But in this case, it's like, how do you culturally tell a person, it's okay, relax, don't make your strength your weakness. Because then as she goes into different areas, unfortunately, everybody was gravitating to other speakers and not so much towards her. And you could see those little things. And we were all women sitting on that table. And I found it very interesting to observe, to see that how we act, gravitate, and how much, going back to what what you're doing, with language, how much language makes a difference to your presentations as well. So leading on that, all right, so I'd like to know, what did you think about this week's episode? Now, this is a 2-part series, and for me this week, I took away another perspective is a fresh perspective. That's what I walked away. That is my stepping out of my comfort thinking. What was it for you? What can you step out of your comfort thinking this year? What would you change? Who can you invite to communicate or talk to that might not be someone you would usually talk to, for example? I'd like to know more. I mean, let me know. All right. Next week, we're delving into the part 2 with my conversation with Benedicte. And this one will be a little bit more on a broader scale about diversity. You know, that conversation that's becoming a little bit of a, ooh, I better watch what I say here. So let's see. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, please share it out with somebody out there who might also gain from it. And if you haven't yet, please follow, because by you following it, those algorithms will love us a little bit more and share it out to others. And they may get to hear a fresh perspective too. Have a good one. Till the next one. Take